You see, the doctors, it only came because we let the fathers, the monsters, we let them rule. But now, all we have to do is make a bedsheet.
Essential service for structural integrity. That's essential service for structural integrity. Y'all know I love to call out my Twitter fiends here on Breadsheet. But this one is very, very, very special. Essential service for structural integrity, or at SANSI, that's at SANSIE, is holding the universe together with her generosity. That's because she is the very first Patreon supporter of Breadsheet. I cannot tell y'all sheetheads out there, cannot even begin to express how much that support means to me, especially right now when I don't really know what I can give back, but rest assured, essential service for structural integrity at SANSI on the Twitters. Something very special is coming your way. I'm doing some October horror stuff and a little backed up right now, but I'm getting caught up. I'm on my new weekly schedule. I'm meeting that self-imposed deadline. Right now, recording this intro Thursday night, the night I'm going to release this, part 2 of the Jordan Holmes interview. And this is really great. This is going to be a tough episode to top, folks. Jordan is a delight, as you know, if you listen to the first part of the interview, and he is a lot of fun, but also we get into kind of weirder, more esoteric, lit majory kind of stuff, talking about his book and politics, and you know how we do here on Breadsheet. We're all over the place, but we're always here for you, the peeps, the sheetheads. Thanks again so much. Thank you so much. Essential Service for Structural Integrity at SANSI, SANSIE. Everybody give her a follow on Twitter. And if you'd like to join her in supporting what I'm doing here, whatever this is, please visit patreon.com/Haas_Bossman. Also, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Haas_Bossman. Stick around till after Jordan's interview for breaking news. This is something from my GFF, from my old grill pill, my patna or my butterbean, as maybe according to the Twitter poll, what we should replace the word patna with, depending on what y'all sheetheads vote on. It's going to be some breaking news after the interview, or at least a breaking take, so stick around for that. I've got a couple things I want to talk about up top. I'm going to try to make this quick. Amy Coney Barrett. Wait, no, wrong. Pam from The Office. Brianna Joy Gray and Noam Chomsky and Virgil Texas, the fighting and low society with Caleb Maupin, and it's just too much. I just want everybody to get along. I'm so glad that I have this refuge that I can come to and be with y'all, people whose souls just radiate pure energy and light. It means a lot to me to be able to connect with y'all, and I'm going to be doing it once a week, from hence to thither. Before I get too into this thing that I'm certain is going to send me off into a tangent, follow me at Haas_Bossman on Twitter and Instagram. Also, please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Haas_Bossman. I am very poor and need money because I don't have a job. Go to Haas.fun, www.Haas.fun, and my YouTube channel too. Lots of fun music and other craziness there. You might have heard there's an ad at the beginning of the episode now for Anchor. That's the people I make the podcast. You already heard about them at the beginning of the episode, so I don't need to say anything else about them. But that it's just a little tiny bit of me trying to squeeze a little bit of money out before I have to go and start driving for Uber or whatever and selling my blood, which I've done before and I don't mind doing. But I'd rather just give my blood away. Follow Jordan Holmes at GoToBedJordan on Twitter. Listen to his amazing podcast, Knowledge Fight. I'm always recommending it perpetually. And download his amazing book, The Quiet Part Loud, at thequietpartloud.com. I don't know if I mentioned that his book is legit really, really great. It's amazing. Awesome book, especially for it's the first novel that he's ever finished. And I would know if it's really good because I'm a disgraced English teacher. Never forget that. Not for anything weird. But yeah, you should check out his book. That's at thequietpartloud.com. And like I say, we get into some real brain stuff with this next one. We go real galaxy brain with the book, talking about capitalism and stuff. Now, let me take a swig of watt. That's short for water. All right, so girlfriend's been out of town, so I've been watching these really long videos. Watched a couple of debates from this channel, Modern Day Debate. Cool idea. I very much support it. It's supposed to be a neutral platform, and their moderator seems to really stick to that. Got me thinking about a lot of like communication topics, communication in general, a topic that's obviously of great interest to the likes of me, communicator extraordinaire, Haas Bossman. I don't know if I've said that yet, but that is my fake name, Haas Bossman, and this is Breadsheet. Breadsheet. So I'm a total weirdo, I know, but I've always liked watching debates, the Oxford style, more formal ones, and everything in between that, and two people yelling at each other on a street corner. Participating in them makes me very nervous. I mean, I can barely sustain a friendly conversation on mic, but they're very, very interesting to watch. Y'all who travel in online leftist circles should be familiar with Brianna Joy Gray's locking of horns with Noam Chomsky over whether vote blue no matter who is the best strategy for the left at the moment. That's a big question that maybe I'll get into more on the next mini-sode. Suffice it to say, I agree with Chomsky that we need to vote for Biden, damage control, but I also think that Brianna Joy Gray's points are totally valid, and my main takeaway from that little interchange was I just thought it was beautiful to see the new generation of leftists challenge and push an elder statesman like Chomsky on what is an actual intellectually and morally complex question. And I'd like to think that somewhere in his literally infinity old brain that somehow still seems to be operating at like 98, 99% capacity, better than my little brain, I'd like to think that Chomsky was glad to see Gray's unwillingness to blindly accept his view as a good thing. He's as old as the hills, as C might say, but he built an indispensable foundation for this new left movement to build upon. And I hope he feels that passing the mantle to someone like Gray, people like Gray, whom I have the utmost respect and admiration for, I hope he feels that he's leaving this modern leftist movement he helped build, and that he was at times for the last 60, 70 years, a very lonely and vulnerable voice in good hands. I'd like to think that he's thinking that on some level, and I think that he is. I'm somewhat optimistic. But, that's an actual difficult question that warrants rigorous debate. I think the thing that they were kind of butting heads over, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. Brianna Joy Gray and Noam Chomsky. It was fiery and spicy, and I think a beautiful thing. I didn't like a lot of the responses to it, but anyway, I think we have the diversity of thought on the left to confront those debates in healthy and productive ways, despite a lot of the discouraging infighting we've been seeing, especially since the Bernie campaign folded and left us without our daddy to keep us together. I am still cautiously optimistic. Okay, that was a tangent. Back to the two types of debates I like to listen to or watch. Here's the deal. Interesting ones, UBI, friend or foe, social democracy versus full-on socialism, fire, friend or foe. I think I'm stealing that one from my boy John, or maybe my boy Brandon. I don't know if they want me to say their last names, but remember that was one of our ideas for a topic to do when we wanted to do a radio show back at Young Harris. I'm going to start having both of them on soon, them my boys. The debates I was watching these past couple days satisfy a completely different type of curiosity in me, as opposed to an actually intellectually interesting, difficult, complex question. How could anyone possibly sustain arguing for that side for that long? That's the last couple debates I watched. That was what interested me about them. I watched Vosh, a streamer leftist debate bro who often annoys me but is real good at debating and has some smart brains, versus some German climate change denying weirdo wacko. And that was fun, kind of interesting. Then I watched friend of the show, Ben Burgess, debate this Trump supporter guy who calls himself Mr. Reagan. Which, I promise I'm zeroing in on a point right now. One big point of contention from the jump in the great Burgess versus Reagan debate, which I recommend watching if you can spare a couple hours, just because it is fascinating to watch somebody at this point trying to defend Donald Trump. One big point of contention from the jump in that debate was whether the debate was Burgess versus Reagan. Sorry, I'm all over the place. This was a 2-hour debate on Modern Day Debate is the channel. It's also on Ben Burgess's channel. Go check it out on his channel. Support him and support them too. Watch it both at the same time, simultaneously. See if you can sync them up. And so this was Burgess versus Mr. Reagan. Again, that's weird to me. But it was Biden versus Trump. It was over whether people should vote for Biden or Trump in 3 weeks or however soon the election is, which, by the way, that's what the breaking take is about at the end of the episode. I feel obligated to say that Ben Burgess did everything he could to try and help get Bernie the nomination, but now is arguing for Biden to, stop the bleeding, triage, as I very much agree with. Trump has caused a lot of damage, and 4 more years, who knows what could happen. We may never get a chance to vote again with 4 more years of Trump. I honestly believe that is a possibility. But this Mr. Reagan dingus kept saying that asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19, meaning the ability to spread the disease without expressing any symptoms, is, quote, very rare. He kept saying that asymptomatic transmission is very rare according to the CDC. So both Burgess and Reagan had computers in front of them, which is good in an absurd debate like this with so many lies flying from the pro-Trump side. So Ben Burgess, old Benny Bergs, he looked up what the CDC is currently saying about it, and the number was 40%. 40%, it's estimated that 40% of transmissions are asymptomatic. And that is not very rare. At least to you, 40% should not be anywhere close to very rare. So Burgess says the CDC's estimate is that 40% of COVID's transmission is asymptomatic. The dum-dum he's debating keeps flat out denying the 40% figure, saying the CDC is lying, repeating this phrase, very rare. Now, in the midst of the debate, I understand why old Benny Bergs didn't go in depth with this, but I think what my bit of research turned up in and the conclusions it led me to are pretty telling. Basically, it looks like a single person from the World Health Organization made an offhand remark back in May or June using that exact phrasing, asymptomatic transmission could be, quote, very rare, then backtracked on it like a week later and said there wasn't enough research or data to know yet. But at that point, it was too late. The weirdos who are apparently planning to go down with the proverbial ship to die on the hill of defending the worst, or at the very least, the most incompetent president we've ever had. I think there's an argument to be made that Trump isn't the worst because he's so ineffective in so many ways, but definitely the dumbest president in American history. The people still defending him have a vested interest in spreading misinformation like this, and they latch onto this one phrase one person said months ago, and it's effective because most people won't look into it, which allows this ding-dong to shamelessly lie throughout the debate. But also, if someone does decide to do quote-unquote research, heavy air quotes there, if you Google asymptomatic transmission very rare, those 4 words, and are dumb enough to still be defending Trump, you'll look at the first 2... I'm sorry, that's mean, but come on. If you see the first 2 headlines that come up in the search results, you probably think that they confirm your very, very incorrect and dangerous beliefs. But if you just look a tiny bit into it, I'm not some expert researcher or anything, but if you just think about it for 2 seconds and look at the dates and read real sources, you will be disabused of this very dangerous belief. Okay, so I'm getting a little worked up here, but Trump supporters, I love you. I'm sorry. I understand your frustration. I feel you. I'm sorry I called you dumb. You're just misled. The world's a scary, confusing place, and you've just been sucked into non-solutions to your problems. Like, you're just supporting things that are going to make the problems that you think are being solved worse, and you're alienating, like, a whole bunch of people in the process and being really mean. And, if you ever come to your senses, you're really going to regret this. But anyway, there's really no shame in it, though. You have everything working against you actually confronting reality. I mean, the right wing is a very powerful, the American right wing, it's a very powerful propaganda machine. Propaganda, marketing, modern marketing was invented in America. So, this stuff it's insidious. I'm sorry, I know this is like condescending, but please, if you're a Trump supporter, don't tune out. I really do just want to make the world a better place. Yes, even for you too. I want us to just hold hands and dance in a circle and drop petals on each other's faces. Okay. Anyway, let's I'll disjumble those for next mini-sode. We're gonna do fun Halloween stuff. I don't think I'm gonna be changing anything leading up to the election. I think the real work, no matter who wins, Trump or Biden, the real work is gonna start after the November election. So, last couple things before we start the interview. Part 2 of Jordan Holmes' interview. I dropped a teaser with some John Carpenter-esque music I made on YouTube and Twitter, used some ugly, tacky elementary school bulletin board stock footage, and a cute, adorable cutout of Miss Fancy, which I've used before, teasing some awesome horror/Halloween stuff. I'm going back and forth with Darcy the Mail Girl, right now, also known as Diana Prince, from The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. That's an awesome show on Shudder that showcases B-horror and like exploitation films, grindhousey stuff. Shudder is my favorite streaming app, probably. All horror stuff. The grindhousey B-movie horror, that's like a genre group that's very close to my heart, and I love it. Darcy the Mail Girl is awesome. You should follow her on Twitter at kinky_horror. I'm pretty sure it's kinky_horror. I read a blog that she wrote at kinky_horror that Diana Prince, or Darcy the Mail Girl, goes by many names, a blog that she wrote about body shaming. Check it out. It's her pinned tweet, which she has some unique insight into body shaming with her background, which we'll get into when I drop my chat with her, which we're going to do the interview next week, and I'm going to try to turn it around real fast, so there might not be much of an intro in next week's episode, but that might be something that you want, is not much of an intro. But we're going to talk serious stuff along those lines, the body shaming and body image stuff. I think it's very, very important stuff. Neither of us are mental health professionals or anything, but we're just going to kind of talk about her experiences. And there's a sort of big question that my girlfriend and I have actually been sort of sparked to conversation. What's the word I'm looking for? Catalyzed, I don't know, to talking about like some feminist issues when watching The Last Drive-In, and because of Darcy the Mail Girl, and about female empowerment and exploitation, and where do we draw the line and that kind of stuff. So she just seems like a wonderful soul, but we're gonna do all that, and of course we're gonna talk shitty and maybe even good horror movies. Also, I'm planning to do a long, big old tier list live stream with my partner, my butterbean, my girlfriend, of movies streaming on Shudder, my favorite streaming service. Like I said, a great time to do a free trial with them to get some good horror in for the Halloween season. And other fun horror stuff for the podcast. Yeah, there's a somewhat important election coming up you might have heard about, but gosh darn it, I'm going to have some Hallows Eve fun before the world probably ends around that time. Follow me at Haas_Bossman on Twitter and Instagram. Also, please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Haas_Bossman. Go to www.haas.fun and my YouTube channel too. Lots of stuff there. Join at Sansi at Essential Service for Structural Integrity. Follow her and join the revolution. Let's change the world. Let's spread love and compassion. Let's make the world a better place. Check out my YouTube channel. Crazy stuff there. Follow Jordan Holmes at Go to Bed Jordan on Twitter. Listen to his amazing podcast, Knowledge Fight. Download his amazing book, The Quiet Part Loud, at thequietpartloud.com. Now, please enjoy, for the last time for a little bit, until I compile all these songs and pop them on SoundCloud or YouTube or Bandcamp, or maybe I can make the original songs like an album available to a certain Patreon tier, make a Patreon exclusive. I don't know. Anyway, here is Jordan's original song, Go to Bed Jordan, and part 2 of my interview with Mr. Jordan Holmes.
He was a totally satanic demon by age 10, reportedly.
What? Why?
You let that guy babysit your kids? I mean, look at that. That is not a human.
Why? He just looks like a guy.
And it's not a mean thing to say that about him. But he doesn't have a soul. And nobody puts that in books. I'm just telling you, that's what I say.
DM, what's your bright spot today? DM, I'm Jordan.
We're a couple dudes. Mic down for this. This is stupid. It's really my speed of stupid, though. Reportedly.
What's your bright spot today? 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 Who wins in a fight, the devil or a Kennedy? If you like this, that will blow my mind.
I have to edit the shit out of my podcast because I go on all these like tangents. But The Quiet Part Loud, it definitely has its own style that like seems very unique to you, or at least like, I don't know, I haven't really read anything that quite reads like it, but you're obviously like a big fan of
Douglas Adams.
Were there like any times when you were writing that you could like feel Adams' influence, him or any other writers? Like what kind of sources did you draw from, if any, consciously?
Well, I mean, consciously for sure. The thing about writing humor is that it is very easy to get somebody to acknowledge humor through the written word. You know, you read something and you go, I know that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And so I respond to it as if that was funny. It is borderline impossible to get somebody to actually read something and then stop and laugh, you know, like incapable of not laughing. And Douglas Adams was maybe one of the few people that I've ever read who I would read his book, and I've read them over and over and over again, and I'll stop and I'll actually have to laugh out loud in a literal sense. And so the more I read that and the more I read funny stuff, you know, like Terry Pratchett is funny. For the most part, he's still one of those guys who you just acknowledge as being funny. You know, there are tons of, you know, good authors who will have a good joke. You know, like in Dickens, if you read his 500-page tomes, there's a good joke in there. There's one good joke. Yeah. But in terms of getting people to actually laugh out loud, I think there are a far more limited number of techniques. So everyone who winds up being funny on the page shares a lot of those same techniques, in the way that joke writers share a lot of the same jokes, or not the same joke structure. Mm-hmm. You know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you think I'm going to say this, and instead I surprise you with this. Then you laugh. Next joke, that kind of thing. So when I'm writing, there's definitely jokes that I can see where it's that kind of tossed off quick little stinger. You know, where you have a sentence that sets you up to go one place, and then there's a comma and one word, and that's the sting that makes you laugh. And that's a very Douglas Adams way of doing things, that kind of British little tossed off humor, the mumble joke, you know, that kind of situation. So there's plenty of those, but I was trying to make something, and that's why the structure of the book itself is hopefully unique or different, is because that's something that I can add to it. in terms of like those quick little jokes there, that's the way to be funny on the page. But in terms of creating characters and dialogue and then structuring it in a way that, like the novel that I've written is chronologically set up. So everything starts from the beginning of something and then ends 2 years later. But you jump around so much into so many different places that I try and create a lot of humor from the juxtaposition of this chapter to this chapter to this chapter being different places that force you to respond to them in their context with the context of the stuff around them. So jokes that wouldn't be funny if it was isolated, hopefully are funny now, I guess.
Within the context of everything.
Yeah.
There were definitely times when I was reading the book that I laughed out loud, and I have to say that, like, I always thought it sounded really cool to be described as a humorist. That sounds like a smarter version of a comedian.
Sure, yeah. It's a highbrow, funny person.
New Yorker
Somebody's
writer.
not really funny, but you know they're funny.
Mark Twain, really, that I remember being surprised by, wow, this is 100 years old, and it's actually kind of making me laugh out loud at times.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Being written on the page, I was always curious about that. Same thing with horror books. I never really read a horror book past Goosebumps until a couple years ago. I started trying some Stephen King stuff, and it was just really interesting to open up this whole other because I just always how could something you're reading actually be that scary?
Yeah.
There was definitely with a lot of the dialogue, there was this sort of, I could kind of see the influence of that somewhat the British humor, the nonchalance, I guess, this sort of matter-of-fact way that a lot of it was told, but it was almost kind of Americanized, and I know that can be construed as a bad thing when you say something's been Americanized, but
if it was not Americanized, then I would have been writing as a British person, which would have been insane.
Yeah, that would be odd.
That would be crazy.
But it's I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it definitely had so I love Australian humor, but it's hard to put into words what exactly makes it unique.
Yeah.
There's sort of a cavalierness to it or something like that. That's really fun. And then with the American thing, maybe just being so, in it all the time, I just can't really think of what it is that distinguishes it.
I try and, I mean, I wish it was more complicated, but I think it really is just, I am a very loud person. So my writing, my dialogue, all of this stuff is meant to be loud. Not everything is screamed at you. Without dynamic range, the screaming doesn't make any sense. But most people stay really quiet and then get loud in these big jumps. And I try and stay really loud, and then when it's quiet, it means more. So that's kind of the thing that I suppose is what Americanizing really is. We're just loud assholes. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the uncharitable way of putting it. Maybe forward, assertive, or something might be the nice way of thinking about it.
I mean, I've made a fairly good career out of just being a really loud person. So why would I stop now?
Yeah, being the loud guy on Knowledge Fight. I mean, it's one of my favorite things that happens on the show regularly is Alex Jones will, or Dan will play a clip of Alex Jones saying well, Asian people are actually a mix between Africans and Latin. And then just hearing you
I genuinely sometimes wonder if people think that I'm reacting if it's fake. I don't know how to describe to everybody that if you just sit and have an actual conversation with me, this is exactly who I am. I am very, very furious all the time. So it's tough. It's tough to, and even now, 3 years, 4 years almost that we've been doing this show, it still infuriates me. I'm mad right now. It's just not even on the show.
I've had listening to the show and pulling up next to people, and when like a clip of Alex Jones is playing, realizing like my windows are down and like, oh shit,
Yeah.
they're gonna think I'm listening to Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Have to like be mindful of that. And I think actually that example comes to mind because that was something I was listening to the show, and he was saying something about that, some weird race shit. And he and I was like pulling up right next to somebody, and there's like a little kid staring at me with their window open right next to me, and it's like, this is a show about how f***ed up that is.
Yeah, I don't think you would want to have your window down whenever it's just whites are the best.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, we're at a stoplight, buddy. We don't need this right now. This is wrong.
Context is very, very necessary. Well, who are some of your like favorite quote unquote serious authors?
Oh man. Let's see. I would say probably Sarah Ornay Jewett. I don't know if that's. So in the 1800s, in the late 1800s, there was this burgeoning regional literature scene. So at the same time as somebody like Kate Chopin was in Louisiana, writing these really fun gothic kind of bayou stories, there was somebody named Sarah Jewett who was in Maine at the time, and she wrote these really quiet, contemplative stories. One of which is just a guy going back to his hometown. That's the story. And she just builds this whole like lived-in atmosphere to where by the end of it, you're just almost in tears at simple beauty. It's like that kind of thing. So it would be pretentious if it was written now, but she lived in the 1800s, so that's all they really had. Like, she couldn't toss in like, and also we were watching Buffy that night. You know, like it's not there for you to have that kind of ironic detachment. And then like Emily Dickinson, surprisingly enough, she's an incredible influence on me. And then who I suppose the other genre that you would get into is like I love science fiction and fantasy. I used to read the fucking Dragonlance novels whenever I was growing up as a kid, you know. And somebody who's really gotten on my radar recently is Scott Lynch, the guy who wrote the Lies of Locke Lamora, the Gentleman Bastard series. I mean, that's not really a serious author, but it's somebody who's modern and who's writing really, really fun things. He writes heist novels, which is like, who doesn't love a good fucking heist, man?
Sure.
You gotta love heist. And then probably Somerset Maugham. You know, The Razor's Edge was really huge for me. Which that sounds super pretentious. That's like the mid 1900s version of having infinite jest on your bookshelf. No, I'm sure I've read it. Yeah. That kind of thing. But it's still a very, very good book.
Yeah. I mean, the one, who was the first author? Because that sounds like it really did have an influence. The first one you mentioned, what was her name again? You said you were comparing or contrasting her with Chopin?
Jewett. Sarah Jewett. Yeah.
The way you were describing her
really
reminded me
of
like a lot of like really good I love country music, and I grew up in the South, and a lot of good country music, older country music is that way, like just very simple, just kind of a portrait of this like, you know, scene of that just like gives you some insight into somebody's life that doesn't really have to say much, you know, but just makes you kind of feel something in that moment.
Yeah. It's a story, but more almost a dollhouse, you know, like one of the things that a literature professor told me when I was a lot younger is that, like, I don't know if you've ever read Middlemarch.
I have not.
But he was comparing Middlemarch by Eliot, I believe, with, I want to say, what's the Dickens novel with the dumb kid? Shit, why can't I remember this?
I read like a couple of Dickens novels, but I haven't read Great Expectations. I know there's a kid in that one. But we
David Copperfield, that's what it is. I'm losing my mind. So yeah, and he was describing the difference between them, and the way he described it is that Elliot built this beautiful dollhouse with all of these perfect characters, all crystallized and perfect. And the problem was it was empty. There was no fire. Nothing was warming the house. And with David Copperfield, it's not as perfectly and meticulously made to look like that dollhouse, but there's just a fire to it. There's an excitement. There's an energy to it. And with that kind of writing style, I've always tried to veer towards the burning, the animated writing. But if you can do that stuff, what you really wind up enjoying is like the quiet dollhouses, if that makes sense. Like as a stand-up for so long, if you write a good joke, I don't laugh. I just go, that's a good joke. Mm-hmm. But if you are really, really terrible in a really unique way, I cannot stop laughing. It's just so funny to me. People who are just so funny. Like there was this one woman when I was starting out at open mics who came out as this character, Madge Jablonski. That's just this old lady. And she was incomprehensible. She was screaming, "Oh my God," and "Boom shakalaka," all the time with no context. And everybody in the crowd is just staring at this like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. But I was laughing maniacally with my laughter. So it turned into a situation where everybody watches her say something and then turns around and looks to see if I'm going to laugh at it. And it's just so funny. It's just so funny to me. Good jokes are boring. I hear those all the time. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I mean, and that a lack of self-awareness maybe can make something. It's like when somebody's, doesn't realize why nobody's laughing at them, or then you can like put a layer on that of like, you're laughing at them, but not for the reason they want you to be laughing at them.
Totally.
It's like the absurdity just sort of like spirals out of control.
Yeah. It's like the Room. He meant that to be a very serious film, and it's so funny.
Yeah. And he tries to lean into that now and say it's a comedy, I think.
Totally. Yeah.
And
I would do it too.
Yeah.
Why not?
Sure. And those movies that people like Sharknado, the movies that are intentionally, they're supposed to be bad, like those are just boring, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. You have to really believe that you're making something good to make something bad enough to be great.
Yes, that is a perfect pull quote for that should be, whenever I write a novel, I'll ask you for a pull quote, or maybe I'll just take it from this and just put it on the book jacket.
I'll do it.
Let's see here. One thing I definitely, when I first came up with the idea to have a chat with you for the podcast, one of the things I want to explore with this is going to be, I think, maybe the eighth or ninth episode of the show, so it's fairly fresh. But one thing I want to try to explore with this show and with some of the YouTube stuff that I've been making is the relationship between art and politics. Because, I'm not really a big theory person. I've been a leftist, considered myself one for a very long time, and read some of the theory stuff. But in general, I've always kind of thought of myself as I'm going to be I'm going to be in a band that turns a 13-year-old kid on to anti-war politics or something like that. That was always my main goal in life.
Right.
But so I'm kind of, wondering, well, how can I, because I wanted to do this project, whatever it is I'm doing here. I've been calling it a delirious anarchist art project. So I kind of have been wondering what I can do, what I can kind of hone in on to try and make, show people that the left is an appealing place to be, or, show them what it's actually like over here. Cause they hear, especially, if people listen to Joe Rogan all the time or whatever, they think it's all people just getting mad at each other for using the wrong pronouns or whatever.
Sure.
When that nothing, basically people just want to know that you are not being an asshole and that you're trying to be nice.
Right.
But so one of the first questions that occurred to me was, I know I've heard you talk about being an arbiter of what is and isn't satire, obviously joking, but like,
Yeah.
especially like considering how Alex Jones seems like completely incapable of actually knowing what satire is.
Can't comprehend it.
Yeah, which is so crazy to me because he talks about it all the time. So what are like some of the main characteristics of good satire in your view?
Probably the main characteristic is, are you skewering something that is entrenched? So, everybody wants to go back to Jonathan Swift and that kind of satire. And he wasn't a good guy. He wasn't like, we should feed the Irish. He was just taking this entrenched effete kind of attitude towards the underclass and skewering it for being full of shit. So satire generally always goes after an entrenched, powerful viewpoint. If you are trying to skewer, if you can't really punch down with satire. So it's right now we consider it to be, solely the playground of the left, because the right can't understand that part. They can't understand that punching down isn't satire, and they can't understand that they are punching down because they think they're the victim. And if you think you're the victim, you're not really going to do that much good work either. So it is considered right now kind of to be left-leaning, but if the left finally winds up with any kind of entrenched power, it's almost certainly going to solidify into viewpoints that don't make any goddamn sense. And then you can write satire about those. It has to be the entrenched powerful that are taken down. And then the other thing is an exploration of their viewpoint taken to the extreme and taken seriously. You can't be ironic about or not ironic. You can't be kind of flippant about satire. It has to be very direct, and it has to be mean. Satire has to be mean. It has to drip with hatred towards the people that are getting it, while at the same time still being detached enough to be funny. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's such a hard line to walk, is that plenty of people get the mean part. Plenty of people get the ironic detachment part. Plenty of people get the trying to be funny part. But a good satire is all of those, and it's deadly. Satire is supposed to be a knife through somebody's heart.
That's another good pull quote. Yeah, I think those actually are two really good characteristics of satire. It's one of those words that can be kind of hard to define. It requires some kind of discussion, and there's a little bit of wiggle room in what does and doesn't. A lot of gray areas, I guess.
Sure.
What does and doesn't count as where is the line between parody and satire? Weird Al is almost all parody, but then there are times when it's I think he is actually satirizing something with this or that line or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think Alex Jones's biggest mistake is in where do you think he falls flat most often, or what are some of the areas when he thinks he's doing satire but is not actually doing it?
Usually he thinks he's doing satire when he's actually saying what he believes. So he's his view of the globalists or the evil cabal trying to destroy us is limited by what his imagination is. So all of the evil he ascribes to them is really stuff that in his head that he would want to do if he had power. So anytime he's trying to satirize the evil left, he's like, oh, they want to kill all these people. Now, admittedly, you want to kill people. Of course you do. I mean, that's just important to do. So he always thinks he's trying to make fun of them, and then winds up agreeing with them and saying that he actually believes that this is what should happen in the first place. So he's not able to divorce that he's mocking somebody for believing what he believes.
Yeah. just like coming at it from a different place, but coming at it from a different direction maybe, and arriving in the same place. And with him and a lot of people on the right, there's so much projection. Like, one of the big things that they complain about, and especially over the past few years, people, Jordan Peterson, all those people, like complaining about everything's too PC and whatnot. And
Sure.
then like this victim mentality, which I've seen, especially since these BLM protests started flaring up, being from a southern town, I've seen a lot of people using the phrase victim mentality that I went to high school with, like on Facebook and stuff, like in a very racist way. All these people on the right I've noticed recently have started really assuming this, like they're the ones who are being persecuted, even though they have some of the biggest platforms, and all these people, a lot of them have like these big backers, like billionaires and stuff, and they're just like projecting that same thing. Like as soon as they got the chance to play the victim, they switched to that role that they had been criticizing before.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you wanna pretend you're Luke Skywalker. You don't want to pretend you're Emperor Palpatine. And if you're Emperor Palpatine, you don't want people to know you're Emperor Palpatine, so you pretend you're Luke Skywalker. It's that kind of, like, in America especially, everybody loves the underdog. So everybody wants to be the underdog, even if they're the one stomping on your throat. It's just the way that our culture is kind of wired.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually, one thing, like, there's a complete side note, but I have never been a sports person. Like, I've always, I was into skateboarding back in the day, so some stuff like that. But I've never liked the main football, baseball, and all that stuff. But a few years ago, I was watching the Super Bowl that was the Patriots versus the Falcons, and there was just enough. I'm in Atlanta. The Falcons very rarely go to the Super Bowl. And the Patriots, I had just heard something about, like, one of them, it's a Trump supporter or something, like the owner, somebody is a big Trump guy. So I was like, kind of rooting for them to win, not even really knowing how to play football. And then, so the Falcons this was 2017, I think. The Falcons were winning, like kicking their ass the entire time until, like, it was like this unprecedented upset, and it's one of the only football games I've ever watched.
Like 3 touchdowns in 1 quarter, something like that. Yeah.
And that was the first time in my life I ever understood, this is why people like sports. They like rooting for the underdog and getting like really into it and upset, because I got so fucking mad. It was like
it is kind of, once you put yourself into that rooting position, you get emotionally attached in a way that would surprise you. I'm sure plenty of people after this whole political realigning is over with will be shocked that they were like, I'm willing to kill for Donald Trump. In 10 years, can you imagine somebody being like, wow, that was great. I really am happy I did that, But you're in a rooting situation, so then you're just like, oh man, he's losing right now, but I want him to come back and win.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see the knots people twist themselves into when the dust settles after, like, the hysterical, like, kind of cult, like, my dad has been, he's pretty conservative, been a Trump apologist up until recently, and it's just like the culty shit is the main thing that I think, like, just made him go, like, I can't anymore with this guy. Like, these people, like, no matter what he does, which I'm surprised it took him as long as it did, but at least, now I know he's at the very least not gonna vote this time around, hopefully. But yeah, I know I'm mindful of your time. I know you said we could go all day here, but I've got now we've gone on long enough to where I could split this into 2 episodes, or I guess I could split it into infinite episodes, since I can do whatever I want. It's my podcast.
Minute by minute podcast. That's a new way of doing things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could be an innovator in that way.
Microcast.
Yeah, I've been had like just such an erratic, even especially considering that I don't have a job and I should just be able to, but like as I take my same mindset that I always took to making music. It's like, musicians take 2 or 3 years to write an album, and I always approached music that way. Like that's about the speed I would always go at. And
Sure.
now that I'm doing this, like a different creative thing that I think there's more of an expectation for it to come out more often. It's like I'm having to like readjust the pace of my creative work, because I'm like trying to make a new piece of theme music every week for this, and it's like pretty time intensive. But I know you spend a lot of time talking for podcasts. You and Dan still all do all the podcasts in person, right? Even with the pandemic.
Well, neither of us are, so we're both we're both people who really never saw anybody too much before. And so in this kind of situation where I think between the two of us, we see maybe 3 other people regularly. So he doesn't live too far away, and it's like being in a bubble where you just are a few blocks away. So we don't really mind continuing to do it in person. And then for our show, it's really, really hard to do it remotely just because our timing is so quick. And the way that we talk to each other is just so seamless that having even like a 30 millisecond delay will really fuck up the way that we talk to each other, For sure. Yeah. That's one thing I'm hoping is that, like, I used to be an entertainment writer. So I basically handled interviewing comedians. I don't know how I wound up with that job because it was really fun. But when I lived in Athens, Georgia, like 10 years ago now at this point, but I've interviewed people before. We would usually talk over the phone, sometimes in person, but we never really did Skype or Zoom interviews or anything. And the lag really does like make such a big difference in totally. It's like so minuscule. I'm hoping that like when I finally am able, maybe a year from now, able to like start interviewing people in person, I'll be used to doing it over Zoom, so it'll be like that much more like of a relief doing it in person. Yeah. It's like swinging with a weighted bat, and then you swing a regular one, and you're like, oh, holy shit, I'm the strongest person in the world. For sure, yeah. So I just had like a couple more specific questions for you here, and then I'll let you get on with your day. But the expression "for land's sake," was that I was an English major in college, and I used to teach high school English, so I might read too much into this stuff. I mean, that's what we always get accused of, right? But is that a common expression in the part of the country where you're from? Or okay. I said it in Dixon, or I set most of the main action in Dixon, Illinois, which is probably about a half hour north from where I grew up. We used to play them in high school football and all of that stuff. And it was, I like it, first of all, because it's the birthplace of Reagan. So that's a great thematic location for the book where everything ends. Absolutely. Yeah. And then I just get to use all the dumb little expressions from Central Illinois. Central and Southern Illinois is so filled with a weird combination of that kind of, I suppose you could say, like a mockable accent, that kind of like Southern accent that people like to muck about with. Most of Southern Illinois was the Confederacy. And so you're in that mix there with all the weird like Northern influences that give you that, that Wisconsin and Minnesota kind of accent, and all of the phrases are just silly. What they want to say is "for God's sake," but they're so repressed in all that weird way. They say "for land's sakes," that kind of thing, and I just love that silly expression. Yeah, that's, being down here in the South, that's my dad will say, he's kind of poking fun at something I think his mother or grandmother used to say, which is he'll say "they." And it's like, "they Lord." And I don't know where that comes from, but it's a replacement for a curse word. And it's like 2 steps removed from like saying God's name, maybe, or like, using the Lord's name in vain or something like that. In Texas, "bless your heart" means go fuck yourself. It's that kind of. Yes. Yeah. Around here too, for sure.
I thought it was just like kind of an interesting, like I said, maybe I was reading too much into it, but the fact that people, they want to say for God's sake, but they're saying for land's sake. And, maybe this is like something, it's like sort of how like the worshiping of property under our current system as opposed to, worshiping God. It's like they just replaced, that's something I've always kind of thought is that like capitalism just sort of like for most people in America, either superseded or in a weird way complemented the religious beliefs, and they just sort of like welded a lot of that same puritanical attitude onto just the idea of the economic system of the country for whatever reason.
That's a really interesting etymology. I had never considered that. I don't know if that would show up in a encyclopedia or whatever, but I really do find that fascinating. Even if it's just subconscious,
Yeah, it's something to, or maybe it's one of those death of the author, like, if you read that in it's there in some way or another anyway, I guess, right?
Sure. I've always kind of hoped that it was more an influence from Native Americans in that, it's a respect for the land. In moving it away from God to land, I've always hoped that was it, but your version is more American than mine, so let's put it that way.
I guess that, both sides of the spectrum could be represented in that. Okay, so also bigotry was like one, obviously a really big topic that you wanted to address in the book. And I know, like, especially nowadays, as a white man, did you have any like reservations, or did you have any sort of like, is it something you were conscious of, like writing about racism and bigotry from the perspective of a white person? Did you have like any kind of like special approach to that, or did you just kind of do it as you saw fit? Did you maybe talk to any people of color about how best to approach it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the big things that I wrote was a speech for the president. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the biggest ways that because that's maybe like within the first 10 chapters, the president gives a big long inauguration speech from a bunker because she was, it's implied that there was an attempted assassination the day before when she was supposed to be giving it in the National Mall. Mm-hmm. And that was influenced heavily. I mean, obviously, there's a quote from Audre Lorde in there. And it's one of those things where I specifically absorbed as much literature from Black women as I possibly could in order to not like create an authentic voice or anything along those lines, but to, at the very least, speak to what Black women authors say is important. I'm not going to write a speech for a Black woman without reading as much Black women literature as I possibly could. I read speeches from everybody. I talked to several of my friends about kind of how to handle that without being just because you can run the risk of doing the white knight thing where you're like, hey, as a white dude, I'm going to solve this. Or you can run the risk of appropriation and be like, hey, as a white dude, I can talk from any perspective and I can write from whatever I want to do and all of that stuff. An artist is capable of doing anything, but I was really trying to say what's important without co-opting any voices. Like I'm not trying to give a prescription from my point of view, so much as trying to express if you have a Black woman character and you haven't spent hours upon hours reading about perspectives that you personally can't possibly experience, then you're going to fuck up that character. Just going to do it. You're going to do it poorly. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it wasn't bad. I thought about it a lot. That's something that I deeply considered over and over and over again is it even okay for me to kind of appropriate that voice for my book? But then again, you can't just write about white people stuff. That sucks. So if I did a good job, hooray. And if I didn't, somebody please tell me so I can not do that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm not the obviously not the person to tell you, but I had that in mind reading it and knowing your personality and the things that you seem to care about based on listening to so many hours of you speaking about
Right.
issues related to that you were writing about in the book. Like, I knew I was in my head somewhere like that you must have been mindful of this. And like, interesting experience, like reading a book about a topic who someone like you already kind of know how they view it in such a like, broad way. And so I think you did a great job with it though. And I was cognizant of that, and I was curious if you would put some of that work in. I figured you did, but sounds like it really paid off.
Yeah, no, that's something that I mean, it's something that I wouldn't probably have even thought about 5 years ago. And then since we started doing the show, and since I've interacted with so many different people and become aware of so much more and received literature, there's so many things where it's like people are asking Black women now to explain stuff, and it's like, this was written in the 60s. You can go back and read that book. You don't need to keep asking, oh, please explain to me why Black people are struggling with all of this stuff. No, just go read a book. Read a fucking book. Audre Lorde wrote thousands of poems about this shit. Learn. It's in the past. You can get better.
Yeah.
Instead of burdening other people. I don't know. Maybe I did a shitty job and nobody should take my advice. So there's that.
Well, I like I say, take it with a molecule of salt, but I think you did a fantastic job, and hopefully, I know the most of the people listening to the show are like, I'm friends with a lot of them on Twitter, and there's some people of color there that are not shy at all about expressing their opinions on this stuff, so they will speak up after they hear this interview. So
please do. Yeah, it's one of those things, and this is the commitment that I have in this regard, and I think is what everybody should have, is tell me I'm wrong and I will fucking fix it. I don't know. I have blind spots all over the place. I was born in an all-white community in a cult, and then I was raised in an all-white community in a small town, Illinois. So no matter how much reading that I do, I don't have many lived-in experiences. And everybody that has pointed something out to me is somebody that I'm grateful for, because I never understand why people don't want to learn. It goes back to the partner girlfriend conversation, where it's like, so much of this stuff is stuff that I never thought about and takes no effort on my part to just be aware of and care for. It's empathy. So if I'm not aware of it, fucking tell me. I want to fix it. I'm not trying to be a dick.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's like with that conversation that we started talking about, like it's I still have not gotten completely out of the habit of calling like non-teenage females girls. And I'll like find myself doing that sometimes, and it's like I know in my own head, I understand the reason for that is that I still think of myself as a 15-year-old. So whenever somebody's I think of you as a woman if you're like 40. I'm 32. So if you're also 32, I think of me as a boy, you as a girl, but that you're not inside my head. So you can't really like expect, or I can't expect you to like not take some kind of offense to that, because it is like diminutive to say that to an adult woman.
Totally.
And my girlfriend is not shy at all about pointing that out to me when I say that. So,
Yeah.
And as long as she still calls me her boyfriend and doesn't want to switch to partner, I guess we're fine. It's between the two of us, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just something where it doesn't require effort really to make an effort to just respect people.
Mm-hmm.
Just to stop. Hey, I could say this. I'll stop and say this. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of related to like, I don't know if I could like sum up my entire political philosophy or socio-political philosophy or whatever. It's just like, there's so much suffering in the world. why add any more to that? And if we're not like, if the project of just having a settled society isn't reducing that amount of suffering, what the hell are we doing? Like, why are we doing any of this shit? So, yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of which, I guess that was pretty much all I had to ask about the book. I mean, you're obviously like communicating a lot of different ideas with the book. As we kind of wrap up here, is there anything that you like, themes or messages that you want readers to take away from the book?
I suppose the biggest theme, or at least the most prominent one to me, is how people are unwilling to back down from like most of the book is filled with all of these kinds of rules that make no sense and are just there as kind of like I guess we're bored kind of thing. So we just have to follow these rules. Like, it is, to me, like one of the great microcosms of the pointlessness of society is daylight savings time. Everyone knows now. Everyone knows. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Every president, every governor could just be like, we're done with daylight savings time. It doesn't help anybody. It's been scientifically proven to cause more harm than good. So we're just going to not do it. And they still do it. We still keep doing it. And so I just keep thinking about all of these ridiculous rules that people won't change for the simple reason that it's the way things have always been done. And everything in the book is like, the way things have always been done are going to kill us all.
I think
that's my theme, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's communicated pretty powerfully in the book. I mean, and I think that idea of like, all we really have to do, it's like, well, we need, like you mentioned, incrementalism earlier. It's like, well, we can't change all this stuff at once. It's like, you do realize all this is just shit we made up, and we can just like decide to not do it anymore.
Yep. I'm just saying, I don't think we're just like, we can't get rid of the Department of Homeland Security. It didn't exist until 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Of course we can get rid of it. Exactly. It's not the Constitution. It wasn't written in 1776 into the fucking Constitution. It was started by an asshole who stole an election. Like most of our shit. So what are we going to do,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I have two more questions for you. This is the second to last one. If you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the United States government, what would it be? And I think end capitalism is kind of a cheat, but you can maybe try to justify that answer if you want.
No, I think and this is my personal view on just about everything. Is before anything, it starts with gender equality, or equality between, I suppose the better way of putting it is to elevate minorities of all kinds, and women especially, to an equal position within government. Like, if I could snap my fingers entirely, it would be to elevate every woman to a complete equal status with men. Like, I don't see how that won't, first of all, help the most disenfranchised people in the country. Women are universally fucked over, and minority women are universally fucked over more than everybody else, period. Yeah. So if you take that one, like, rising tides lift all boats kind of point of view for that, I think instantly things are not fixed, but fucking 40% better in a stroke. If frankly, like right now, if the federal government just said all black women make as much as the highest paid white man, that might solve everything. Like, that's kind of that situation. I feel like it is hard not to think of there's like, you're turning things into a hierarchy of need. Like, okay, so you're putting the needs of black women over the needs of trans women or the needs of all this stuff. And that's why it's more important to just take it as a whole, like everybody. Mm-hmm. Those are where we should be focusing on for reparative justice, restorative justice, not just, equalizing things, I suppose.
Yeah, I remember when Joe Biden announced that he was going to choose, I think he specifically said, eventually it was, I'm going to choose a black woman as my running mate. Mm-hmm. My first thought was, you shouldn't have said that because the right is just going to use that to bludgeon you. Like, they're just going to talk about, Kamala Harris, she's just a diversity hire or whatever. And, she has tons of other problems. You don't have to go there. But the right wing, that is the place that they would want to go with it. But I don't even think like that, the whole idea of reverse racism or whatever, like there are enough people qualified. It's not like there are only, 2 or 3 people in any given time who are qualified to be president and vice president of the United States. Like there are probably multiple people from every imaginable demographic of people who would make good president or vice president of the United States. And so like deciding that you're going to choose somebody from an underrepresented group doesn't have to be quote unquote reverse racism or whatever. Like, there's going to be like, you're going to be able to find highly qualified people from every demographic because, genetics don't determine things like that.
Sure. I would say one of the things, and I'll keep going back to Audre Lorde until she's wrong about something, but one thing to focus on is we should be thinking about restorative justice or reparative justice. Not only do I not think it's wrong to say, I'm specifically looking for a Black woman, I think that's something that should be prioritized across the field. Just because we're now, just elevating people to not being fucked over isn't the same as restoring how much they've been fucked over.
Absolutely.
So it's like, okay, so now we're not going to discriminate against Black women, but we're not going to do anything to fix the 500 years that we have been discriminating against Black women. That's wrong. That's just wrong. So in terms of like affirmative action and that stuff, I generally think it doesn't go far enough. Like when we're talking about restorative justice, that does mean prioritizing minority women, minority voices, all of that stuff, to the disenfranchisement of old white dudes. They need to be pushed aside. Their focuses, their needs are not pressing and they are not as important. And justice demands that we do something to atone for fucking all of the shit that we've done. And, if that means like a white person saying like, oh, well, we're just as qualified. Why are you only choosing her because of her skin? I'm not choosing her because of her skin. I'm choosing her because the history of America demands it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, totally agree. Could not agree more on that. And yeah, I think so. The final question, I had a talk with an artist the other night, and I asked her, what other questions should I ask future guests? And she told me to ask this question. So I'm going to end on this one, unless you have anything else to add after this. How often do you change or wash your sheets?
Oh, boy. Pre-quarantine, once every couple of weeks.
Okay.
Post-quarantine, we are marinating in our own filth. I was doing real good. We were doing great, lived cleanly. It was fantastic.
I think a lot of people probably in the same boat. And yeah, that's kind of been us too. We've showering and it's gone from every day to every other day to every 3 days and that sort of thing. So it's like, well, I'm not going outside. I'm not gonna wear my good shirt if I'm just gonna be inside all day. So
yeah, totally. Why would I bother with that noise?
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else? Actually, I should ask. Pluggables, do those? Where can people find you and follow you and stuff like that?
It's knowledgefight.com for the podcast. It's thequietpartloud.com for the book. It's at Go to Bed Jordan for my handle, and then at knowledge_fight for the show's handle, and find the show on iTunes. That's basically it, I guess. I hope you like it.
Excellent. Yeah. I have recommended the show before, and I recommend it to people all the time, actually. So thank you so much for joining me today, taking the time out.
Thank you.
Being so generous with your time.
This was fantastic. I had a great time.
Awesome. I did too. Well, it was nice to talk to you face to face, and
that'll work then, I guess.
I think you were loud and clear. So, all right. Thank you so much, Jordan. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, good luck with your show.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
He was a totally
satanic demon by Agent Kent, reportedly.
What? Why?
You let that guy babysit your kids. I mean, look at that. That is not a human.
Why? He just looks like a guy.
And it's not a mean thing to say that about him. But he doesn't have a soul. And nobody puts that in books. I'm just telling you, that's what I say.
DM,
What's your bright spot today?
DM, I'm short.
We're a couple dudes. Mic down for this. This is stupid. It's really my speed of stupid, though. Reportedly.
What's your bright spot today? 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 Who wins in a fight, the devil or a Kennedy? If you like this, that will blow my mind.
To me, like it's like, you know, business partner or something like that. I don't like
yeah,
too
I get
cold.
what you're saying, I guess.
Too
We'll have
clinical.
to come up with a new word.
Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed to Breadsheet so you'll get new episodes every Thursday night, Friday morning. Also rate and review and stuff, that helps. This Trump town hall is playing in the background as I type this, and I think we might be spoken too soon. They're really going in for the kill. The establishment has had enough of this weirdo, it seems. But what do I know? Anyway, make sure you tune in next week, when I'll be joined by Darcy the male girl from The Last Drive In with Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder. Have a lovely weekend and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @Hus_Bossman and subscribe to my YouTube channel and stuff. Twitch too, if you're into that sort of thing. Make sure you flood another sentient being's heart soul with healing light before you go to bed, and don't be afraid of yourself.